Ubisoft, what happened to you? Spent too much time hanging around with Hayden Christensen, I'd warrant, because their primary issue is that they can't seem to stop throwing sand at us like determined seaside picnickers attempting to keep their blanket clean in a hurricane. I've been to a few beaches in my time, and with that profound personal experience comes a certain depth of understanding that I feel qualifies me to state that sand isn't a very nice substance to get in one's face, mouth, or video games. I'm lying through my teeth, obviously, because Breath of the Wild is very good, but when you've made a driving game that has the same game design as your first-person shooter that has the same game design as your third-person stealth game, I'd imagine you're probably running a bit short on ideas. There was a time, briefly, back before what's come to be known as the Ubisoft Sandbox game, a formula that began to feel more tired than an insomniac in a mattress warehouse became the de facto product from the company, where those French maniacs decided to take a break from Assassin's Creed regurgitation and instead decided to make a good old-fashioned 2D platformer utilizing a character so beloved and popular that he was overshadowed by a bipedal shrieking rabbit in his own game. In a world where the average AAA gets laughed out of the room if it's not got a checklist of chores to complete in a game world roughly the size of Siberia, Rayman Origins leaped onto the scene in a splash of brightly coloured two-dimensional joy to show everyone that you can absolutely swing a full-on box retail release of a 2D platformer from a major studio if you're just willing to take a risk. Oh no! So, you know, it didn't do too well, but it was considered a critical darling when it was released, and for extraordinarily good reason. It's an exceptional game. It was directed by none other than Rayman's father himself, Michel Ancel, and I'm sure he's very proud of his odd, limbless, sausage-faced son and the dramatic impact he's had on popular culture. Not least the fact that surely thousands of young people had their sexual awakening thrust upon them by that randy Frenchman and his sexually charged, large-chested fairies. The last proper 2D Rayman game that wasn't that odd GBA version of Hoodlum Havoc was the original one on the PlayStation back in 1995. Whether or not that game was any good, however, is a mystery lost to time because nobody's ever actually gotten past Bandland. So when Ancel proudly proclaimed he wanted to make a new 2D Rayman game in a board meeting and had managed to convince the marketing department to please step away from that open window, Ubisoft threw themselves into making a whole new engine called the UbiArt framework specifically for the game, and they slapped it out, cut a bunch of corners off, and the whole thing was excellent. It was a damn good time. I think the approach to these games is typified in a certain statement by the man himself, likely based on that famous Carmack quote when he claimed that Rayman Legends was a bit like a porno. You go straight to the essential without ever really wondering why the plumber was there in the first place. Well, technically he said it in French, but either way it's both a very honest and straightforward approach to making a fun video game and also a scathing indictment of Super Mario 4 Revelations. You might wonder why I've spent so much time talking about Rayman Origins in a review that's ostensibly for Rayman Legends, but that's because Rayman Legends has over half of Rayman Origins in it. I'm serious, out of Origins' 60 levels, 40 of them are in Legends in an act of charity not seen since Valve put some of their most high-profile games into a bundle pack and sold them for a dream. An act that apparently cost them dearly, because the most interesting thing anyone even tangentially related to Valve has produced over the past half-decade is a page of fan fiction. So Rayman Legends is very much Origins, but more of it, and that might not be the best pitch in the world. At least it's not as effective as it's not dissimilar to pornography, but fortunately the exceptional quality of Origins means that a slight improvement and a fresh coat of paint turns a very good game into an incredible one. Never let it be said that I don't lay my cards out on the table early with these things. And it's a hell of a new coat of paint they apply as well, because as pretty as Origins was, Legends surpasses it, and to this day, despite the game coming up on being 4 years old, it still stuns me how amazing Legends looks. One set of levels I really didn't like in Origins was the Sea of Serendipity, primarily because swimming in these games isn't very fun, and also the music was terrible, even though everyone else seemed to love it. So Legends gave me some severe Vietnam-esque flashbacks when the World 20,000 Lums Under the Sea's first level, the mysterious floating island, started out with that same music and the same swimming gimmick. I was all set to hate it then when all of a sudden the game crash-shifted into fucking James Bond meets BioShock, and the fact that I'm not kidding at all probably says more about how incredible Legends is than any degree of manic praise ever could. If I were a paranoid man, I'd say they aimed that twist directly at me, but of course they wouldn't do that. Ah! It may be perplexing to you that the character on the screen right now is clearly not Rayman unless he went through some very dramatic changes in the past decade, so it's worth saying that Legends has more playable characters than most video games have lines of dialogue. Only it actually doesn't, because the grand majority of palette swaps of the same female human, well, female toothpick with breasts, as the case may be, or swaps of Rayman, Glowbox, and the teensies themselves. But yeah, it's nice to be able to, you know, play it your way. provided you don't mind hearing the same inordinately grating vocal ping that sounds like a squeaky toy copulating with a rubber chicken 15 times per level. Really, my favourite thing about Rayman Legends is just how absurdly happy everything is. The characters look like they're having more fun than you are. Everyone's beaming constantly, whether they're jumping or running or sliding or murdering. The music's jaunty and lively, everything's bright and colourful, it's just so much bloody fun. And the gameplay somehow matches this theme of concentrated, exuberant joy to the point where it almost feels like a rhythm game until you are actually totally playing a legitimate for real rhythm game. The fact that this 2D platformer has controls so fluid and borderline sensual that you can seamlessly turn it into an actual real rhythm game really speaks to the quality of the gameplay on the table here, and it absolutely is one of the best feeling platformers I've ever played. The jumps feel controllable without feeling sticky, the running feels fast without feeling hard to control, and the chocolate bars the game dispenses in half-hour intervals are sweet without being nauseating. Not to say the game's without fault, there are only two truly flawless things in this world, and those are strawberry licorice and thigh highs. Of particular annoyance are the Murphy sections, implemented in Legends because it was originally incepted as a Wii U game before Ubisoft realised that making a game exclusively for the Wii U is like writing a book exclusively in Sumerian, and subsequently reworked the entire angle where it now remains hanging limply off the main gameplay, more a vestigial nuisance than anything else, the appendix of the game it used to be before Ubisoft decided to port it to other, less ephemeral consoles with futures longer than the lifespan of the average mayfly, which seems oddly appropriate considering he's, you know. In effect, the Murphy levels are sort of like Lemmings meets Kirby Canvas Curse, where you as the player make a path for either the co-op or AI-controlled character running around the level, which works extremely well in co-op, but less well when you're desperately, tearfully pleading with the AI to go back and grab the collectible 5 steps behind them. However, in the non-Wii U, Vita, and now Switch versions of the game, the mechanic is replaced with a less interesting but far more functional workaround where Murphy just goes to whatever you'd need to cut and you hit a button and make him cut it, effectively turning the platforming into more of just a push this button when you're ready to move on, I guess, type situation, than an actual gameplay challenge. That's not to say they don't do anything interesting with it, and on some occasions they turn it into an actually engaging mechanic, but it's really hard to argue that its inclusion was at all necessary. Another marvellously unnecessary feature is the lucky ticket system, through which you receive Origins levels amongst other things, which manages to achieve that sweet spot of feeling too scripted to give you that sense of, oh, I got lucky there, whilst having the other rewards be so insubstantial that any reward that isn't a level from Rayman Origins feels like a loss. What are these stupid blob creatures supposed to be for? Why are there so many of them? Why are they so frightening? There are also a few levels where you get turned into a duck for no reason other than to make the game substantially less enjoyable in a piece of game design I've taken to calling because fuck you, and I genuinely wonder why they were included. It's not as though it's tonally consistent with the levels they take place in, unless I'm dramatically misunderestimating the prominence of ducks in Day of the Dead celebrations, which wouldn't surprise me honestly. The closest I've come to experiencing that particular celebration was eating a plate of chili whilst playing Grim Fandango, but these are small, insubstantial quibbles in the face of the overbearing behemoth of the rest of the game's quality, whose sheer mass suffocates the life out of whatever negatives I might otherwise have to say about it. Fundamentally, Rayman Legends is a better Rayman Origins. If you're looking for a fun 2D platformer, a brilliant little co-op experience, or a video game that exists on the Nintendo Switch, it's hard to go wrong with it. Indeed, I expect one would have to try their best to ruin their own experience to not enjoy the game, perhaps by upending a bucket of battery acid on their head for every level completed. There are hundreds of other small things that I love about Legends that I could point out, like how wonderful and majestic the music can be in those little instances where the game takes a turn away from being goofy and has genuine moments of wonder and atmosphere, or how each world has a sense of logical progression in its own thematic arc without saying a word dialogue-wise, giving you just enough of a plot to keep you interested in the open quotes story close quotes each one presents, or how every level has moving elements in the background, so despite the game taking place on a 2D plane, the whole thing feels vivid and alive, or how an unseen audience will go every time you discover a secret area. Oh god, I really love Rayman Legends. Switch version's cool too. One of my favourite things about it is how it really is built for co-op, seeing as you can just pop both JoyCons off and both work perfectly as their own controllers, although you're invariably going to give your uncool friend the Joy-Con with the control stick in the centre. I would ask why Nintendo felt the need to put it in such an impractical place, but then I remembered they designed a controller for an unknown hypothetical race of triple-armed beings from some theoretical fifth dimension, and swiftly forgive them because God knows they're trying. So there it is, that's more or less that's my justification for reviewing a personal favourite of mine 4 years after its initial release, is that the Switch version is cool. That was a strong ending, huh?